On behalf of the management of Ramakrishna Hospital, and I thank all of you for joining this webinar. And I would like to introduce our speakers today, Dr. Lakshmi, IVF consultant, and Dr. Suvanya, infertility consultant. Both of them are attached to this hospital for more than 2 decades. And they're doing very well, and the department is on par with any guidelines set by the international standards. So our results are almost equal to any hospital throughout the globe. And the first topic will be by Dr. Lakshmi. I invite Dr. Lakshmi to take over the stage.
Thank you very much, sir. Good evening to all. Thank you for giving us an opportunity to share our work in about the IVF, and thanks for the kind introduction, sir. So today we are going to talk about the 2 topics, and both are challenging. One is about the ovarian response to any medication that we do in infertility treatment. There are 2 sets of patients who respond very low, and the other set is they respond high. And these are the 2 challenges, and we are going to discuss about how we manage a low ovarian responder. A low ovarian responder is a person who responds very poorly to any form of treatment, either with infertility drugs or for an IUI or in an IVF. These are the general facts. The women are very different from men. Women are very different to men with regard to the reproductive aging. A woman's entire lifetime supply of eggs is present at birth, and decreasing ovarian reserve is inevitable with increasing age, resulting in complete infertility by the age of 40 to 50 years. There are 10% of women who will become menopausal by the age of 45, and they would reach the end of their fertility potential or reproductive potential by the age of 35 years. It is said that 13 years prior to the menopausal age, they would have reached their end of the fertility potential, which would work out to be approximately 32. We need to test to identify this silent at-risk population, and these are called low ovarian responders. And the prevalence in the normal population is about 10 to 25%, and of late we are seeing them more and more. Now, how do we diagnose them? There are 3 factors. One is the age of the person. Second is biochemically, by doing a blood test. That is, there are a lot of hormone tests are available, but among them, the most sensitive and the most recent one is the anti-Mullerian hormone. And third is clinically by looking at their ovaries, that is the antral follicle count. In the age group, according to the Center for Disease Control, they have said that less than 30 years, there's 7% of them will experience infertility. If the woman is 35 age group, 11% would experience infertility. As they age, by the age of 45, 87 would experience infertility. Thus, any woman 30 years and above, no conception after 1 year of trying normally should be evaluated. And clinically, how do we do it? By looking at the ovary. The ovary would have the antral follicle count. The best time to evaluate them is just when they have finished their periods, that is on the day 4 or day 5. The higher the follicular count, the better it is, and we count the number of follicles. And if the follicles are between 5 to 10, then we say the ovaries are having a normal reserve. That is, when we stimulate them, we can expect about 4 to 5 follicles in each ovary to develop. But if there are 3 follicles and below, then we say they have got poor reserve, and 12 follicles per ovary would mean a polycystic ovary, which would be discussed in our next topic. Then when we are taking the history, if the woman gives a history of shortening of cycle, it indicates deteriorating of the ovarian reserve, short cycle and less bleeding. Then biochemically, looking at the AMH value, if the AMH is an hormone, anti-Mullerian hormone, and which is secreted from the corpus luteum, from the granulosa cells of the follicle, and it remains constant. It can be tested at any time of the cycle. It need not be done on the day 2. If the value is 0.5 to 1 nanogram, it has got a poor response. The patient is having a poor responder. If it is more than 3.5, she becomes a hyper responder, and in between is a good responder or a normal responder. So if we have 2 patients, one is 37 years and her AMH is 0.7 nanogram, and she's got, we'll say, okay, she's the age appropriate diminished ovarian reserve. Then similarly, we have another girl who's 22 years, her AMH is similar, 0.7 nanogram per ml. We say that she's got premature diminished ovarian reserve, and this is the silent cause of infertility, and she comes under the low responder. And if we don't take care of them now, then they would go into a premature ovarian failure. Now, in both the groups, whatever method of modality of treatment you do to make them conceive, they will have overall a low pregnancy and a low live birth rate, irrespective of their age. So there are few classifications. There are so many more classification has come. Of this, we use the Bologna criteria, which should have 2 out of 3 features. Age is one of the important criteria, as we discussed, more than 40 years. And if you see a low ovarian reserve, 3 to 7 follicles in each ovary, that is 5 to 7 follicles together. AMH between 0.5 to 1 milligram, or we have the previous records have gone through previous IVF and where they got less than 5 oocytes. So they become a poor responders. So once we have classified them, then who are the ones whom we should be testing for their ovarian reserve? Now, ovarian reserve is a complex clinical phenomena that is influenced by age, genetics, and environmental variable. Testing is indicated women over 30 years of age. They have a history of exposure to a confirmed gonadotoxin like tobacco, smoke, chemotherapy, or radiation. Women with a strong family history of early menopause or a premature ovarian failure. Women who have had extensive ovarian surgery, example, ovarian cystectomy or unilateral oophorectomy. Now we are finding that normal responders are becoming lesser and lesser. We come across 2 groups of patients, one who is either too high responder or a very low responders. The reason being, again, the environmental, the age factor. The age is because they're getting married late, they're starting the family late. Genetics, because and the environmental put together. The usual, the plastics, the chemicals, and the diet, everything has led to the lower responders. Now, once we have diagnosed that this woman has got a low responder or she's got a low ovarian reserve, she needs a detailed counseling. They have to be explained the implication of a low AMH and her antral follicle and the age, all 3 put together. We have to explain to them, and that they cannot waste time and they should start their family soon. Most of the time we find that the husband is staying somewhere else, the wife is working somewhere. So we have to give them a guidelines that yes, you have to start the treatment early. And then the ovarian stimulation, what sort of a treatment we are going to do. And if there are any adjuvants, we can improve their ovarian function. Now, if she is a young patient, less than 35 years, she's got a normal tubes, the sperm count is good, then ask her to start immediately with a superovulation. Superovulation is like where they gives you the probability of pregnancy would be around 18 to 20%. A combination of the ovarian induction drugs like clomiphene or letrozole in addition to gonadotropin injections, and try that for 3 to 4 cycles and give a higher dosage like 150 to 225. A normal responder, we will use only 75. But when we see a poor responder, we go with a higher dosage from day 2 to day 3. And if the response comes low or they have completed 3 cycles, we have to further counsel them for an early ART. Say she has completed 3 cycles or she is responding poorly, then what do we do for her? Then we'll add some adjuvants. What is this adjuvants are? That the ovary has got primordial follicles, it has got primary and secondary. Before it enters into the pool that is called antral follicle pool, which becomes sensitive to the gonadotropin. It takes about 120 days from the recruitment to the selection into the antral follicle pool. And in between, lot of follicles will have programmed cell death. To prevent that, we have to give them androgens. What does androgen does is it acts synergetically with FSH and prevents programmed cell death. So that is what is the function of giving a testosterone or DHA. DHA is a dehydroepiandrosterone. So that I was telling you, it prevents the atresia of the follicles, that is from the primordial till it enters the pool. It creates a PCO-like environment, and the therapeutic dose being 75 milligrams given for 8 to 12 weeks, and the side effects mainly is acne and little bit of hair loss. Then they said, instead of giving DHA, why not we give them testosterone directly? So they have come out with a transdermal testosterone, that is, you temporarily expose these follicles to androgens, and which would augment their response to FSH hormone. 20 microgram is given once a day. It's a transdermal, so it has to be applied onto the skin for 21 days prior to the IVF cycle, and this has led to a reduced cancellation rate. And there have been a lot of studies about it, and wherein they found that there were 20 patients in each pool, each group control and the steady group, and the steady group had increase in follicle number, more number of embryos, and the clinical pregnancy rate was 30% and cancellation rate was 20% only. And this was a prospective study done in previously 2 cancelled cycles. So this is what we do use it, and we do get a good response. Then once the patient has been given these adjuvants, and then she enters into the IVF cycle. Now what do we do here? We can add to the regular gonadotropin hormones, we can add growth hormone. This growth hormone will regulate follicular genesis by increasing the sensitivity of the ovaries to gonadotropins. It is given at a dosage of 4 to 12 units from day 2 till they are ready for trigger. And the Cochrane review has said they have got about 6 RCTs they studied, and they said they've got an improved clinical pregnancy rate and a live birth rate. So in addition to the regular ovarian stimulation, we can add gonadotropins. Second, now there is a luteal phase estradiol. That is, we are trying to save the oocyte from becoming dominant in the previous cycle itself. In a natural cycle, what happens is, in the luteal phase, because the oocyte has got a poor quality in a low responder, they produce low E2. And low E2 will cause rise of FSH and causes an early follicular recruitment. That is, even prior to she gets a menstruation, the follicle is already recruited. So when we go into the cycle and start the stimulation, a single follicle would grow. And so to prevent that E2 fall, we give them estradiol from day 25 of the cycle, 4 milligrams, to keep this FSH low. This is one other method to save their follicles. So this luteal phase estradiol gave more number of mature oocytes, low cancellation rate. There was no difference in the clinical pregnancy rate. This is a meta-analysis done in a 450 patients with a steady group and 606 control group. Third is we can use GnRH antagon on the day 25. Again, it would bring down the estrogen levels and prevents the disparity of follicle size. We have to avoid suppressive therapy like oral contraceptive, or use a long protocol should be avoided in that. Then, in the early follicular phase, the day she gets a period, we can start. See, for a follicle to develop, you need an LH and FSH hormone. So what we do is we use that. So GnRH analog is an injection available. When given at 200 micrograms on day 2, day 3, day 4, it would cause a rise in LH and FSH. In addition, we give the injection for follicular growth, and that would give an improved follicular recruitment. And the dosage for FSH or the HMG, these are the two drugs we use, that is around 300 international unit from day 3 to be started. Next is we can also use letrozole instead of GnRH analog, and that would increase the response to the clomiphene citrate, and the letrozole would improve the response of the follicles to the ovarian stimulation. Then what sort of gonadotropins are we going to use? Either we can use HMG or we can use FSH. The maximum dose they set is 300, but we can go up till 450 also. We have to start early in the cycle from the day 2 itself, as the recruitment would start in the late luteal or the early follicular phase, and reduce the dose as the adequate response is achieved. So this is a Cochrane study which says that beyond giving 300 IU, this has got no advantage. Then there is a maximum and minimal dose. They say the number of follicles in the ovary when they are low responder is less. Either you give a higher response or a lower dosage, the outcome is going to be same. So if you use a minimal dose, that is letrozole from day 2 and FSH from day 3, or you would use 300 IU of FSH and 150 HMG, they will have similar outcome. Clinical pregnancy rate would be 36% versus 38%. And how this is done, from day 2 of the cycle, we start gonadotropin, and days 5 or day 6 when we scan and see a follicle of 14 mm, that becomes dominant, and that's the time we start the GnRH antagon to prevent the LH surge and an early ovulation. So we wait till the follicles reach about 18 millimeters, and only then they are triggered. The better is, there are two methods. Their GnRH antagon is available as a single dose or a multiple dose, but giving a multiple dose would be a better option. They have done a lot of studies, GnRH antagon versus GnRH analog flare, and they have given more in favor of GnRH flare protocol. Here there are another study, GnRH antagon versus GnRH analog flare. In the pregnancy rate, they said it is an equivocal results. In case the woman has got a very low follicle, that is just 1 or 2, then we can go in for a natural cycle. That is, just follow the cycle, and once the follicle is 14 millimeters, give her an antagon. Once it reaches 17 mm, time her, and we can do the aspiration, and those embryos can be used for IVF. This is done for a very poor responders. What method to do, IVF, or we should be doing ICSI? If there are less than 5 oocytes, they have got increased chances of fertilization failure. So they said ICSI gives a higher fertilization rate. There's not much increase in the implantation rate or the pregnancy rate, but ICSI is more advantageous in a poor responders. When do we transfer? Majority of our embryo transfers are done in day 3, but they have done a prospective trials. They said day 2 transfer would give you a higher pregnancy rate because the diminished embryo quality when it is incubated until day 3. So if you transfer in day 2, it is in the natural environment, and that would give her better chances. But if the woman is a poor responder and already has had multiple failed IVF cycles, she is more than 42 years, and her FSH is more than 15, her AMH is very low, suggest her only oocyte donation. Now what we have started is embryo cryopreservation. That is, each cycle you get about 2 or 3 oocytes, make the embryo 1 or 2, freeze and keep. Then again the next cycle, again stimulate her. And that way you can pool these embryos, and that could be transferred. And that we have done for several patients, and we have got a good results. The other one is going in for acupunctures, herbal treatment. Many of them, even without telling us, they go. And this transcutaneous electrical acupoint stimulation, this is one of the recommended one. And that gives an improved clinical pregnancy rates. To conclude, They have to improve their pregnancy rate, a lifestyle modification that the girl should understand to get married early, start a family early, reduce her weight, DHEA supplementation, transdermal testosterone, E2 priming, ANTAC, or a FLAIR protocol, ICSI, and day 2 transfer. Gonadotropin maximum of 300 IU, avoid long protocols with OCP suppression, FLAIR, or an antagon regimen is standard. Thank you. Escape.
Thank you, Dr. Lakshmi. Now
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
we can have the question answer session later.
Yes, sure, sir.
Dr. Suganya, please.
Yes, sir. Good evening, all. Actually, I thank all who have logged in on the Saturday evening between 4 to 5. It is amazing that everyone is attentive till the last session. Thank you once again. So when Madam spoke about poor responder, definitely when there is something called poor, there should be something hyper. So what we are talking about is any response is about ovarian response. That's what we mean actually. Hyper responders is about the ovarian response. There could be a poor ovarian response or a hyper ovarian response. So depending on this hyper responders, what I'm going to go through in this couple of slides, or maybe or 5 to 10 slides, is who are hyper responders and why are we concerned about this response of the ovary. Anyway, we need a little more response, but what is the concern that when they hyper respond? And how do we predict that? How do we prevent them? And how do we manage? This is how we are going to go through these couple of slides coming up. So knowing this hyper response, the treatment for infertility itself is a hyper response phenomenon actually. So as we understand, in normal follicular growth or ovulation, it happens with the monofollicular development. But we need more than one follicle in particular cycle. So that is what the treatment for infertility is as such. To increase the fertility chances and increase the pregnancy chances. So it can be happening in both IVF cycles and in non-IVF cycles also. The aim is to produce more follicles, that is making the ovary to respond more. But then what is the concern? Mild to moderate ovarian response, it is affordable and the patient can tolerate. But if you go for real hyperstimulation, it will go for severe cases and even it will lead to mortality. So in IVF, almost all stimulation we land up in mild stimulation. 100% we will land up in mild hyperstimulation. But moderate will go to 20 to 40%. Severe is about 10%. And out of 45 to 500, sometimes we may land up in mortality also. So we want to avoid this mortality. So that is why the hyper response, we have to be very, very conscious on. So what is this syndrome actually? We term it as ovarian hyperstimulation syndrome. So normal ovarian hyper response is ovarian hyperstimulation, but when it goes for a multiple phenomenon, then we call it as ovarian hyperstimulation syndrome. It is preventable, it is iatrogenic, and we have to never allow it to happen. These patients who ever walk in for stimulation, they are infertile, they don't have a disease. So we can't afford OHSS leading to mortality. So what is the concern? So once they hyperstimulate, they will develop this ovarian hyperstimulation syndrome. And because of that, we may land up in poor success rate and definitely mortality and the risk of cancellation of the cycle. They spend a lot for a particular cycle. They have emotional trauma and definitely we cannot lose a cycle. So there is higher risk of cancellation if you go for a hyper response. And of course, there will be decreased pregnancy as well as the clinical birth rate also. So that is why we have to be very, very cautious, very, very careful in stimulating these patients and never allow this OHSS to happen in our scenarios. How do we predict? Who are all the patients? Before only starting, when we see a patient for the first time, we should assess them and we should be making our own protocols thinking who are the lower responders, who are the normal responders, who are the hyper responders. Because once we know who are the hyper responders, we can be making our own protocol to have a proper decreasing chances of having a hyper response. So this polycystic ovarian patients, in thin patient, especially very low BMI patients, previous history of OHSS, and when we started stimulating, we can see the rising estradiol values, which is coming from the follicles. And even before stimulating, when we have a high AMH, as Madam was talking about anti-Mullerian hormone and their values, if they have a high AMH, definitely these ovaries are going to blow up and they're going to give us problems. So all these indices will warn us, okay, these patients may go in for hyperresponse. So we have to predict early and we have to follow a protocol. And when we do an ultrasound, when we see a polycystic ovarian pattern and a high antral follicular count, when we do it between day 5 to day 10 of their menstrual cycle. In COH, what is COH is controlled ovarian hyperstimulation. The aim or goal of any IVF stimulation is COH. It is controlled ovarian hyperstimulation. We are hyperstimulating the ovary, but in a controlled manner. So whenever we do a COH, when we land up in more than 18 follicles, we aim more than a follicle, but when they start developing more than 18 follicles, and when we are aspirating, when we get more than 20 oocytes, then we are in trouble and we are going to land up in OHSS. So the main thing is we have to predict who are the patients will go into that so that it will make us to prevent it also. So looking into this picture, which is on the left side is a normal ovary which has a few antral follicular count. But on the right side, if you see, we can see the ovaries full of small black ones, which are the AFC, and this is polycystic ovaries. All these follicles is going to blow up when we're going to give them gonadotrophins for stimulation. So this is another picture of polycystic ovaries, which will definitely go in for OHSS. So these patients will need to form a treatment plan before only we touch on any drugs. So how do we prevent? Now, knowing who are the patient, predicting who will go in for this OHSS, we should be able to prevent them. When it comes to prevention, it is primary as well as secondary. So before getting into the problem, what are the primary preventions we can choose? So once we've assessed the patient, we have to choose the gonadotrophins. Gonadotrophins, as we know FSH, LH, we do a combination also. So we have to be knowing which to be chosen for this particular patient. And then we can use a low dose of the gonadotrophins itself. So we cannot, as Madam was talking about, how many international units we'll be using, between 150 to 225 international units, or even we can go up till 400 also. But in these patients, we have to limit between 150 to 175 international units. And then the third thing is that we can always use our antagonist cycle. We have agonist cycle, we have antagonist cycle for doing this hyperstimulation protocols and IVF treatments. But this antagonist cycle will help us more to control this OHSS. So these were the three main things that we were using. But of late, there is many other things which is coming up so that we can primarily prevent this problem. That is natural cycle IVF, wherein we don't give gonadotrophins, we allow them to have a natural cycle. But yes, we land up in very less number of oocytes, but that is going to benefit them from avoiding such dreaded complication. And then the last is minimal stimulation, giving them very, very low dose. And those stimulation protocols are called soft protocols. So these are the primary preventive measures wherein we have to choose before only we start the treatment for the patient from day one. And this has to be written in our case sheets before we start, and the whole staff as well as the doctors and even the embryologist should be knowing what we're going to go through this patient. And now once you have started stimulating, this is how that ovary will start looking. All the smaller ones will blow up, and this is one ovary that we are seeing. The same type, there will be the other ovary also. So almost each ovary is having more than 20 follicles. Now what we have to do? Now we have to prevent it. Still we have some more time from preventing this complication. So how do we prevent that? That we always mention as secondary prevention. So once we have landed up in this hyperstimulated ovary, we can very well cancel the cycle. But it is not as easy as we say. We cannot cancel the cycle because already they have paid and it is quite expensive in lakhs. So we cannot cancel the cycle. So how do we go about them? We can do coasting. What is coasting is just stop gonadotrophins, just stop a day or two of this in giving these injections. If you stop these injections, all these follicles will get arrested. It will not get arrested, but it will stop growing it will start growing in a slower pace rather than in the faster pace. And we have a second cohort of follicles which will not come up. So this is called coasting. So for a day or two, we stop the gonadotrophins, and then again we assess the ovaries, and then again continue the treatment. This is the second thing. Third thing is low dose of HCG. What does that do? HCG is a hormone, human chorionic gonadotrophin, which is used for ovulation trigger. As we all know, ovulation happens because of LH. It is in a natural menstrual cycle. For mimicking this LH, we give HCG for an ovulation trigger. So for all these follicles to ovulate, we have to give HCG before we aspirate the follicles. So depending upon the dose of the HCG, we can control the level of hormones which is coming out of these follicles. So we can always choose a low dose HCG. And then agonist trigger. We can also use GnRH agonist as an ovulation trigger apart from HCG also. Even that will have a better control. So after this, actually the whole phenomenon, what happens, because of this hyperstimulation, because of the follicles which is growing on both the ovaries, because of the higher estradiol which is coming out, this estradiol will cause increased vasogenic action, vasogenic active factors, and it causes all the intravascular fluid to come out. It will come to the extravascular space. So that is the worry we have. So the whole fluid will come out. It will start accumulating everywhere. So that is why we have to give albumin and hydroxyethyl starch. When we give this osmotic agent, it will try to retain the fluid inside the vessel so that it can be reduced a little bit. And then last thing is dopamine agonist. Even they say that has little bit of effect in controlling the fluid shift. So this is when we start this hyperstimulation, we can do all these procedures to avoid this dreaded complication again. And finally, once we aspirate all the oocytes, we have an option to freeze all the oocytes. We can freeze all the oocytes or make embryos and then freeze all the embryos. So why that? How does that happen is, if we don't freeze it and if we transfer it, because we'll land up in secondary ovigescence. Because once the pregnancy happens, there'll be a lot of beta HCG which is coming out. Even that will increase the vascular permeability, and it will again lead to the secondary ovigescence. So to prevent the secondary ovigescence, we can all freeze the oocytes as well as the embryos. This is how we try to prevent once we landed up in such big ovary as we are seeing here. So once it is done, once we have lost, okay, somewhere there is a problem and the patient has hyperstimulated, she has gone in for OHSS. Now how do we manage? So when the management comes, we have to always classify them as mild, moderate, severe, or critical. This mild to moderate, we can always manage as an OP. As an outpatient management, we can manage. They needn't have any admission. But severe and critical, definitely they have to be in the hospital. Of course, as I termed, all IVF protocols, all IVF treatment is a mild hyperstimulation. So mild can be managed very easily. So when it comes to severe or critical, how do we go about it? So how do we diagnose this? Once they come with mild to moderate, they will have minimal abdominal distension, they will have nausea, they will have vomiting, they will have mild ascites, and hematological parameters will be normal. They don't have any hemo concentration because of the fluid shift, and urine output will be normal. So when all these symptoms are there, we term them as mild to moderate, and they can be managed as with close monitoring as but every day they'll be coming to the hospital, or any other alternate days they'll be called to the hospital just to monitor them on any collection of the ascites or anything. But when they have a severe problem, so when it turns to be severe, they will definitely have dyspnea, they will have hemoconcentration, the hematocrit goes up very badly, they will have hydrothorax, renal shutdown happens, ascites, and they are prone for thrombotic events. When you suspect, we always follow with hematocrit. When the hematocrit goes up, we have to be very, very careful in looking all these. We have to ask all these questions to them, and also you have to look into all these parameters. So when they go for severe, we try to admit them. So once we admit, we always tell them we limit the activity of any stimulated patient, because ovaries are huge and they may go in for torsion. So we always ask them to limit activity and check their weight daily. because of twices, because any drastic weight gain of half a kilo to 1 kg a day, definitely there is fluid accumulation somewhere in the body. And then monitor strict IO chart. And of course, albumin hydroxyethyl starch is of real helpful in OHSS. And cabergoline, which is a dopamine agonist, it also helps us. And thromboprophylaxis, heparin always helps the patient when they have any thrombosis. And wherever the paracentesis, culdocentesis, pleurocentesis is always done when it discomforts the patient. Mild ascites, mild pleural effusion is always acceptable in OHSS, but when it causes symptoms, when the abdominal distension is high, when the pleural effusion, it causes dyspnea, definitely we have to aspirate. And we have to maintain a strict fluid and electrolyte balance. So as we saw through this is how we manage any severe or critical, and critical as well as we always involve ICU team also when the patient goes into critical OHSS. So going through this topic of hyperresponse, knowing more of what is hyperresponders, how do we manage, how do we predict, how do we prevent, the main aim and goal of this is we have to avoid this hyperresponse. Then not one patient should go for this OHSS. So always we aim for the OHSS free clinic. And we are really proud to say here that in our hospital, in SRH IVF department, we had only mild OHSS. We had not one single patient of severe or critical OHSS. Hardly we had few patients that patients also we got referral from the other hospitals, but not our own patients. So this one we are very proud, and we are very proud to say on this platform to say that we are a OHSS free clinic. And thank you for patient listening, and thank you, sir.
Thank you, Suganya. Thank you, Suganya.
Yes, sir.
And I would like to welcome any questions from the audience.
Hello. I'm Dr. Bhanumati here. Very well presented by Dr. Lakshmi and Dr. Suganya, the contrast picture and simplified manner. It was really done very good job. Congratulations to both of you. And to Dr. Lakshmi, what is the incidence of in our people who are coming for infertility, what is the percentage of people with poor responders in your this age?
In our experience, in our hospital, we get somewhere between 20 to 25% of them are low responders.
25%, even up to that.
Yes.
Okay, because many are after many trials would have come to you.
Many trials. Secondly, their older age group, they start, and then even if we counsel them for an early ART, they will not listen to it, and they will travel and they go in for a alternate treatment like Ayurveda, herbal, and by the time they come back to us, they are more than 35.
Yeah.
So they come in. But to start with, as a diagnosis for a low responders, yes, 25% we are seeing them.
Okay. And you are able to manage to get them live baby rate better with them?
With them. We are able to do because we are doing a lot of embryo pooling and transfer.
Okay, that's really good to know that, because that is a very important information should be passed on to people. And that's it. Really good. And hyperstimulation, as Suganya said, it's everybody should be aware and they need not be worried. Say the lady can react this way or that way, and which cycle they are reacting like that. You really brought out very nicely, Suganya.
Thank you, ma'am.
That's nice.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello. Madam, very nice presentation, Dr. Lakshmi and Suganya, ma'am.
Thank you.
Madam, what about the use of antagon in the luteal phase, madam?
Antagon in the luteal phase prevents the rise of E2.
Okay, madam. How to use it? What is the dose, madam?
Dosage is 0.25 on day 25 of the cycle. Only one dose.
Single dose, madam? Okay.
Only single dose on day 25 of the cycle.
Day 25. Okay, madam. Thank you, madam.
Thank you. The simpler would be to give them only estradiol, 2 milligram BD for 7 days, from day 25 till day 1 of periods.
Okay, madam. Okay. Thank you, madam.
Thank you.
What about the psychological support? Because I can understand they will be in a very distressed state. How are you managing that? Poor
But we have to
responders.
counsel them, go on counseling them, and give them assurance and motivate them and help them to make the decisions. These
Okay.
are the 3 ways.
Dr. Suganya,
Madam,
what is the low dose HCG you recommend for prevention of OHSS?
Madam, HCG,
HCG.
madam, we give just a half. Usually we give recombinant. Recombinant usual dose is 250 mics. Sometimes we reduce the urinary HCG, not giving recombinant, and then give urinary HCG for 2,500. And always 2,500. We reduce the dose of HCG to 2,500 to 5,000. Usually sometimes we go up to 10,000 to reduce into the half the dose of HCG.
Okay, Suganya. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. So any other questions?
To see a normal responder has become a rare phenomenon nowadays. We see them either as a poor or we see them as a high responder.
Because you are in IVF.
No, I'm not saying that. When you start evaluating them, a normal responder is becoming lesser and lesser.
Okay.
The numbers are coming down.
The stress is making them in a different
Exactly.
active.
Yeah. And the environment.
Yeah, exactly.
And
Good
by
to
the
know
time
that.
they get married and start the family itself, they are becoming 35.
Mm.
So it's becoming difficult for them to get pregnant.
Okay.
So age is the most important criteria. So if we see a lady less than 32 years, encourage her. And if she's 32 to 35, encourage her to go for a higher treatment like an IUI. And once she crosses 35, definitely advise only IVF.
With this background, I think public awareness program
Yeah.
should be along with this so that this can be looked addressed. What do you say, Dr. Lakshmi?
Sure, we can do that. And we have to give them more. We have written a small write-up for that will come tomorrow where
Okay.
to educate the couple.
Sure. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Any other questions? If there are no more interactions, then
We can record that.
today actually the presentation was so nice. I heard it fully.
Thank you,
And,
sir.
both are excellent speakers, really.
Thank you.
And I think Suganya can develop this art by speaking in various platforms.
Okay. Thank you.
Because your expression is excellent. Anyway, I thank all the participants who have participated in large numbers today. And I thank all the consultants and doctors from our hospital and from the city of Coimbatore on behalf of the management. And I thank both the speakers, Dr. Lakshmi and Dr. Suganya, for accepting and taking part in this webinar. I thank all of you once again. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I thank the marketing department also and the PR department for organizing this webinar.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.